There we go. All right. So we are at the We the People Meet meeting, and Kristen Chevrier is joining us. She is a state representative for Utah, and she is a longtime friend as well as a great patriot and has helped with a lot of things over the years. She also is an expert when it comes to vaccinations and their effects and the good and the bad and the ugly regarding those. Um, and people will just be joining. We've got someone named Rachel joining us now. Um, so yeah, this group was created originally because several people that I knew had different beliefs than me, and I found that we could if we sit and argue on the internet, we don't get along too great, but if we talk on the phone, we seem to get along a lot better and understand each other better and have a good back and forth dialogue. And so, um, in addition, part of my thoughts were that the world is trying to separate us. It's trying to keep us on our ends of the spectrum and not coordinating. You got some news stations pushing one ideology and some pushing another, and it feels like it's an effort to keep us apart rather than kind of see the other side, try to assume each other is crazy and never really come together. But we as Americans have to come together if we're not going to be run by the government. We have to kind of stand up for what we want as Americans overall and not play this partisan game back and forth where it's like a pendulum going one way then going the other. So um yeah, and we've had a few meetings so far, a couple meetings so far, and it's been really positive and a lot of good things shared. Um, but anyway, last time we were the other people that started it was Dallin Polson and Seth Stewart. And Dallin is more left-leaning, Seth is independent, I'm more right-leaning Republican. So it's been a pretty good, healthy discussion each time. And one of our number one rules is that we will be respectful no matter whose opinion is being shared. We'll always be respectful of them and their opinions and validate them and not not try to uh assume they're crazy because they disagree with us. So that is one of the main rules of the group. And so yeah, last time we talked. Well, first of all, I want to talk about the first meeting. The first meeting, Kristen, was interesting because it seemed that everybody, no matter what our leaning, we had almost the exact same concerns, especially about due process. Freedom of speech was a big thing. How no matter what side of the political spectrum you're on, um, everyone seemed to be concerned that their rights to their opinions might be curtailed just by different consequences that you get if you believe and speak out a certain way. And so that was interesting that a common theme is personal rights and freedom of speech were very strong, whether from the Democrats on the call, independent or Republican. We all felt a little bit fearful that those rights are being or could be taken away. So it didn't matter which side you're on, that fear existed. And we talked about our fears and our hopes for the future of what we'd like to see America be or our neighborhoods be, and it really didn't matter which belief you had. It revolved around rights, especially freedom of speech. So then the next meeting we talked about specific issues that are making the headlines right now, like tariffs, deportation and due process, fair election, defendant rights, and freedom of speech. And it seemed like we had a lot of the same concerns there and a lot of the same beliefs. And so I think this group, if we can get a few more participants over the long run, it really could bring us together as Americans instead of tear us apart. A lot of times our groups are formed based on who believes exactly how we do, and it's more like a sounding board. So we're trying to bring people together that have differing opinions and try to see eye to eye and not continue this fight that has been going in the separation. So anyway, with that, we went through and talked about tariffs and it is scary what changes have been made and quickly and seem like some people are understanding that it kind of has to be done because of the risks of being so reliant on China, and some are saying it could have been done a lot slower. There might be a real reason for it, and um, there's been a lot of jobs lost over the years because of our tariff policy. A lot of warehouses have been and purchases have gone overseas. So maybe I don't know if you have a quick opinion you want to share on that, Kristen. What your thoughts are on the tariffs?
So I have a lot of thoughts
Hmm.
around tariffs. One of them is that other countries have been charging us tariffs
Hmm.
to export our goods, and so um, I noticed in your meeting notes that there was discussion about other countries wanting to come to the table now. So maybe even if we disagree with tariffs and if the tariffs are actually raising the cost of living to some extent for US citizens, maybe pushing the tariffs is a good idea because it helps the other countries to realize that we're not going to just pay tariffs, that we can either work together or they are also going to pay tariffs.
Hmm.
So maybe it's kind of a carrot stick thing. Um, and I'm not sure what the intent of the administration is on the tariffs, whether they want to keep them or whether it was a negotiation tool. But I think it could be used as both. And then as far as our getting products from other countries, I think that we need to be looking at fair trade more than free trade because there are a lot of human rights violations that are happening with other countries, particularly in China, where people are being forced to make things that we don't really need, honestly, and make them very, very cheaply. And I think that as a culture, we've gotten so used to being able to buy things cheaply that we esteem things lightly. And I think that it would be better for us to try to be more fair and also to put less emphasis on things that are of little or no value. So I don't know, those are just some of my thoughts around the tariff issue, but I think that it is a very good stick,
Hmm.
possibly a carrot in some situations.
Okay, great. And then the next one we were talking about deportation and due process. Do you feel like the government is overstepping their bounds with the due process and avoiding that, or what do you feel, or have you heard?
So, again, I've heard a lot of things on this. I have people who I'm good friends with here who are here legally on visas, and they are um, feeling threatened that they may be deported even though they're here legally. Like they've been told not to travel outside of the US and they've been told to keep their heads down. And I also have children who work with people who are Hispanic, Latino, who are here, some of them legally, some of them not. But I think they're all fearful, not knowing what the future holds for them. And I think some of that is misinformation, some of it is fear porn. But I think that there is some truth to it. Having heard this from one of my friends from India, who has been told that he needs to keep a low profile and not leave the country for a while because if he leaves, he may not be able to come back. So I think the focus should be on getting rid of the repeat offenders, the people who have caused enormous harm to American citizens and to others, the gang members. Um, if we could keep the focus on them and try not to cast too broad of a net and catch people that we don't need to or necessarily want to catch. I think that we need to deport the people who are causing harm. Um, as far as due process, my understanding, whether this is cold-hearted or whatever you want to call it, is that due process applies to citizens and not necessarily to anyone who crosses the border.
Mhm.
But on some level, there should be due process because otherwise you end up catching people in the net that shouldn't be caught.
Right.
So I think it's a complicated issue, but I do believe strongly in due process under almost every circumstance. But I think, I guess it is due process if you have been caught before and you have been convicted before, then you've already had due process, right?
That makes sense. Yep.
So I don't know that we have to go through the court process every time we catch someone,
Mhm.
especially if they've been caught and tried before.
Yeah, that makes sense to me too. Does anyone else want to disagree with that, or how does everyone else feel if they've been tried and convicted in the past? Is that enough due process for somebody that's being deported, or should there be more due process? If we know if yeah, go ahead. Seth, that might have unmuted.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I guess I wasn't here for most of this, but I would just affirm that the only valid criminal conviction under the Constitution is by a jury.
Mhm.
And if they haven't received a conviction by a jury, then the conviction's invalid. It's completely bogus. So I don't know what's the exact question of double jeopardy or whatnot, or if someone was ordered
Well,
to be
I
deported
think,
but then was let loose. I don't know.
yeah, so what I'm saying is that there are many who have been deported repeatedly and they keep coming back. So, how many times do we need to put them through court proceedings before we get rid of them?
That's all right. And then I don't want to take too long on that because our time is limited. I also want to get into your legislative session that just ended. There are some items that our group has put on the agenda that we want to talk about, and some that we'd like you to share. So, I guess I'll let you choose, Kristen. Do you want to start with the items that you would like to talk about, or would you like to address our ones that we have questions on first?
Well, the ones I know the best are my own bills,
Yeah, yeah.
obviously.
Let's hear about yours.
So,
I'd like to hear that.
um, okay, so the first one that I passed was the SNAP bill, which removed soda from SNAP funding.
Uh-huh.
And I really love this one for a lot of reasons. One of the reasons is that soda is the number one purchase on SNAP dollars. And if you don't know what SNAP is, it's the EBT, the food stamp funding. So the taxpayers are paying for people to buy soda as their number one purchase. And then we are paying on the other end for Medicare and Medicaid for the people who have damaged their health with these worse than empty calories. So I think this is a win-win on both ends. And I think SNAP is supposed to be supplemental nutrition assistance program. So if what we're after is nutrition, then we should not be paying for soda. I think that we should extend it to include other things that are unhealthy. How far we should extend it is a question. I know some people have been concerned that it then becomes subjective and some people are deciding for other people what's healthy and what isn't. And being as involved in the vaccine issue as I am, I can see the danger there. So it's something worth looking at, but right now it's just at soda. The other one that I passed is the food additives in schools bill.
Mhm.
And that one requires the removal of a long list of synthetic dyes and other petrochemicals from school foods, which seems to me to be a no-brainer. There was a lot of support for this. We did have some really inexplicable um, pushback
Mhm.
from some of the legislators. I think because they like junk food. I don't know really. Um, but but for the most part, we've had tremendous support, and we met with the
Can I
people.
ask, was it partisan, the pushback, or was it really spread between Republicans, Democrats?
it was nonpartisan. So we had support from Democrats and we had pushback from Republicans. On
Interesting.
the SNAP bill, the Democrats mostly opposed the SNAP bill because they felt like it marginalized people. But I think that's a misunderstanding of both the intent of the SNAP program and the intent of the bill.
Mm-hmm.
But on the food dye issue, we had bipartisan support on that.
Nice.
And
What bills were those? What
probably
numbers were they? I want to get that down.
HB 402 was the dye bill.
Uh-huh.
HB 403 was the SNAP bill.
Okay.
Um, so on the dye bill, my team and I went to visit Granite School District a week ago, and they've been doing this for 3 years already. So it was really interesting to tour their facility and see how they're managing it and to look at their purchasing methods. And they showed us sample purchase orders and gave us a whole bunch of information that we could use to help other schools get on board with this.
Uh-huh.
So then this week, yesterday, we met with the rural districts because we had initially, well, the first bill carves out any school district under 5,500 students
Uh-huh.
and the charter schools. And that was mostly because I was trying to get it back into committee. It had been held in committee, and I was trying to satisfy the chair that I was covering all the bases and that we had support. And when the charter school lobbyists didn't seem like they wanted to be cooperative, we just decided to take the charter schools out and in the process, the rural schools. But interestingly, we lost more votes on having removed the rural schools than we did on any other single issue because people wanted their schools included.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that interesting?
That's great.
It wasn't because they objected to the bill, it was because we didn't include their kids.
Mm-hmm. No,
So,
I
oh,
want
go
to,
ahead.
so those were the two main bills you sponsored this year?
Well, I had four.
Two.
Those are the two that passed.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have one that is so we have license plate readers, automatic license plate readers throughout the state.
Mm-hmm.
Those collect data every day, all day. And it goes from license plates to possibly the make and condition of the back end of your car to possibly who the passengers are. And we've seen all of that,
Mm-hmm.
depending on the reader, on the angle, and other issues. But all of that information is currently stored at Flock, which is the company, the data collection company, for 9 months in Utah. It used to be unlimited storage until Dan McKay passed a bill limiting it to 9 months, I think in 2023.
Mm-hmm.
So we worked with everybody across the spectrum, the law enforcement, top brass in law enforcement, the AG's office, Libertas, all of the data privacy committees. And we came up with some guardrails to protect the data, including limiting the retention to 90 days instead of 9 months, unless there's an active warrant or an active criminal investigation, in which case you can get a warrant to
Yeah.
extend a particular piece of information if it's germane to the case. But the rest of the data, like where you go shopping and what time you go shopping and who you go with and all of that stuff, that has to be deleted within 90 days. Um, and let's see, other things were who the data could be shared with. Currently, we share our data with California, but California does not share their data with us. They passed a law to prohibit that sharing of data across state lines. So we're sharing ours, but they're not sharing theirs.
And the sole
Um,
purpose is to try to catch people that have done something wrong.
It is. And initially, we got a lot of pushback from law enforcement because they feel like it's more important for them to catch the bad guys than to protect the good guys.
Mm-hmm.
But after some persuasion and my pointing out that they have image problems and that it would be good for them to be seen as caring about people's private data, they realized that there was some work to do. And so everyone came to the table and we came up with a really good bill. It made it all the way through the process, but the clock ran out before it could make it through the Senate floor. So I will be refiling that one tomorrow, to be run next session.
And that's going to be
So,
HB what?
well, it doesn't have it won't have a number. It's right now, the bill that we ran is HB 468, I think.
Gotcha.
Um, but it will have a different number when it comes up in the next session.
Wonderful.
So watch for that one. I think it's a good civil rights, privacy protecting bill that should appeal to everyone across the board. And I also had bipartisan support on that one. In fact, we only had two dissenting votes in the House on that. And I think the people just didn't understand. I think they thought that I was trying to introduce license plate readers when what I'm trying to do is set parameters and control them. So I think the reason they voted no, both of them, is because they didn't understand.
That makes sense.
So please watch for that one. It's really an important, um, it's important in setting policy, not only for Utah, but nationally on the use of license plate readers, because nobody is doing this. We've got so much data being collected and shared, and nothing protecting the rights of privacy for individuals.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we know that this information is used for particular demographics more than others. And so this should be an appealing bill to everyone to help protect the vulnerable and the innocent.
Mm-hmm.
So the last one, was actually one that is the closest to my heart, literally and figuratively. This is the blood bill. And this bill, I ran it because I have a friend whose daughter has three congenital heart defects and has to have occasional surgeries, which may or may not require transfusions, but she has to have blood on hand in order to make sure that she's safe during the surgery. So, in her most recent surgery, she decided that she wanted to have a donor that she selected rather than just take potluck at the blood bank. And this is important because when you have three congenital heart defects or a similar situation, um, it's important to control as many variables as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And so they wanted to do that. It's legal in all 50 states to do this. The problem is that the hospitals have policies against accepting the blood. So this bill would have required hospitals to accept the blood as long as it came through a certified provider that was following all of the federal safety guidelines. So the blood is treated just the same way as any other blood in the blood bank. It's just that it's either your own blood stored up prior to a surgery or procedure, or it's the blood of somebody who has volunteered to donate for you, somebody that you know and that you are comfortable with.
Mm-hmm.
So this bill was number 7 on the Senate board at the end of the day on the last day. So
Mm-hmm.
we shut down at midnight and it was number 7. So it didn't get a chance to get all the way through the process. Again, it was unanimous at every step.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, I want to pause for a second, and we've done a lot of talking, Kristen and I, but I haven't let anyone else jump in. So I want to take a minute and let anyone else that wants to say something jump in at this point. Make comments about what she's talked about, or bring up your own issues, and after that we'll go into the HB 273 and SB 203, the ones that Seth had wanted to talk about before. So, as pertaining to the conversation so far, does anyone else have a comment?
I got something real quick. It's while we have our guest on the line, I would like to see what she thinks about this group and what the intention is, and how she sees that it could be effective, and maybe some suggestions.
Thank you. I really appreciate that question. And it was something that I would wanted to address at the beginning, and I forgot to do that. So one of the things that I have focused on in my advocacy and also in my political career, I guess you could call it, over the past 25 or more years, is trying to bring people together who have different opinions. And I think it's critical that we learn how to talk to each other, we learn how to share opinions, and we learn how to be respectful. And that's how I feel I have been most successful, is by listening to all sides and then trying to come together on a solution. And I actually spoke at the State Legislative Council, I think is what they're called, last week. And they are a group like this, where they're bipartisan or multi-partisan. It's not just two parties that are involved in that group, but it's a bunch of women that have come together to discuss difficult issues, and they meet regularly, and they are respectful to each other, and they talk about hard things. I think this is a great idea, and I told Rob that when he was telling me about this, that bringing people together and showing respect for varied opinions, I think, is the biggest thing that is going to move us forward as a culture and a society so that we can have positive change. I think the more we polarize ourselves and dig in, the harder it's going to be. And it could eventually just end up in civil war because we have so many varied opinions. And I think that we can reach some really good resolutions if we can work together. So I appreciate the group and the purpose. That answer the
Th-
question?
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
I
I
wanted to ask
have.
a question.
Oh, go ahead, Rachel.
Yes.
Um, Kristen, I love some of the ideas that you're bringing to the table, and you'd made an interesting comment about this license plate bill that some of your colleagues didn't understand and thought it was introducing the scanners. And I pulled up your bill, I read through it. It's not particularly long, and it's really easy to understand. So why is it that you think that they don't understand it? Are they not reading it?
Yes, good question. I am sure that those two in particular did not read it. It is difficult to read every word of every bill because we're looking at dozens of bills every day. If you're in the committee where the bill is heard initially, you have a better, more in-depth understanding of what is in the bill. You're more likely to have read it. Um, a lot of times I've found that because of time, and this is a reason why we should run fewer bills, because of time, we have a tendency to look at the people that we trust and assume that they read the bill, which is not a good assumption. Um, I think it's really important. I've even gone as far as to, if I didn't think I quite understood a bill or the intention of a bill, I will go listen to the hearing because I want to know what kind of testimony was given for and against, what are the pros and cons, how are people understanding this, and who is behind it, what is the intent. You don't have time to do that every single time, but I think the biggest problem, other than not having read the bill, for these two particular legislators is that they had preconceived notions on the bill because of the title of the bill. And when I looked at the title of the bill, I realized that it did look like this was introducing something rather than limiting something. So I'm changing the title for next session, so that it's clear that it's trying to bolster privacy and it's not trying to push the license plate readers. But it's a really good question. I know that from my own experience that it's impossible to read every single bill word for word before it passes, and partly because they can be substituted on the floor. So you can have read it the morning before or the night before, and then you get there and it's a different bill.
Mm.
And the other thing is that during the last week, a lot of the bills that have gone over to the Senate have been adjusted slightly and then sent back for concurrence. And it's really hard to keep up with the bills flying back from the Senate and make sure that you understand what the changes were. There's one, and I'm sorry if I'm going on too long, Rob, I'll try to wrap it up here, but
Oh no, you're
there
good.
was one in particular on the last day of the session. The legislator whose bill it was stood up and said, "This one just came back from the Senate. There was just one minor change." And before I could even push my button to ask a question, which would have been what was the change,
Yeah.
um, the speaker didn't see any lights on, and so he said, "Okay, not seeing any lights, we're going to go to a vote." So we voted, and I voted no. And then and I was the only one who voted no. I called the legislator. We have our little phones on the desks there, and I said, "I voted no on this because you didn't say what the change was." And it was a very minor change, but so was changing may to shall a few years ago when we went to mail-in ballots, mandatory mail-in ballots. That was a one word. So you could say that it was a very minor change, but the substance of that change was enormous and impactful.
I
So,
appreciate
yeah,
that. That you, unless you understand it, you're not going to vote for it. I appreciate that. So,
well, you're welcome.
Yeah,
other questions? Go ahead, Seth.
yeah. I just had one question for Christian. Thanks for being here, by the way. Sorry I'm late. Didn't want to miss this. So, yeah, just on the point of the SNAP bill, I think it's awesome that you're whacking back the Hydra heads here. I'm pretty sure we don't want our taxpayer dollars going to give people type 2 diabetes with all the soda. My follow-on question to that is just taking the same concept further, I guess. Uh, is I don't know. I feel like we have to try to treat like these instances of overreach and socialism in our government kind of like a cancer, and it's so prolific that you can't just carve it all out all at once. So I appreciate that there's like a
Yeah.
gradual approach here. I think you mentioned that you were looking into some expansions for it on the count of the nutrition aspect. Could you speak to that and maybe like what kind of expansions? Did I hear that right, or is it? I would just propose maybe an alternative way of looking at it is just to say, rather than expanding the program, can we look at other areas? Because I see the need to improve people's nutrition and health, but are there other areas we could look at to improve people's health that wouldn't, expand the program in any way?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, um, yeah, there are two ways to look at it. We could try to improve health overall, which I think was the intent of the press conference that I flew back to DC for last week. Health and Human Services Secretary Kennedy did a press conference there on removing food dyes and petrochemicals from all of our food and encouraging the food industry to get started on that. That is one way that we can approach it. If the food supply is cleaner, then we have less problems with SNAP. So then we don't have to go directly to SNAP and start doing things with SNAP. Another way, if we wanted to limit it to people who are buying nutritional supplements with tax dollars, um, originally we had candy included in the bill. We took candy out partly because it seemed like maybe it was going a little too far and we wouldn't be able to pass the bill, and we may have been right on that. Other states passed it with the candy in it just fine. So we may have been able to, I don't know, but it barely passed the Senate with just the soda. So we'll never know. We could include sugar content. We could there I think there are a lot of ways that we could look at it. We could say if you have over this amount of sugar per serving, maybe it shouldn't be included. The problems come when the suppliers are trying to implement this. And because the programs have to be written so that the cards are accepted for whatever it is we're allowing or disallowing. Um, so that does cause a little bit of work. So I don't know. I'm open to options. I don't know that I'm going to address the SNAP issue this session, but I am going to address the school food bill. We're going to try to include the charter schools and the smaller districts at their request, actually. I asked them yesterday, do you want us to run legislation to include you, or would you prefer to do this on your own? And they said, please run the legislation. So, anyway, I will do that. And I am actually working on meeting with the administration of HHS over the next couple of months to see what else we can do that would improve the health outcomes for our state and for the nation. So that's what I'm thinking right now. We're just starting into the process for the next session. So I'm open to ideas, certainly.
Okay, so and I don't want to take all the time on this, but I just wanted to clarify. So by expanding that, you meant expanding the things that would be in the bill for removal from SNAP eligibility. Is that what you meant?
Yes, if we decide to do that, yes.
Okay.
But I think there are other options.
Yeah, and yeah, Debbie's got a great comment here. Sugar's tricky. That would take cereal from children. Um, but
Well,
yeah,
reducing sugar doesn't. Removing sugar, yes, but we've been reducing salt for about a decade now, and I think we've gone overboard on reducing salt. So if we could find a middle ground somewhere where uh, we have less sugar and maybe a tiny bit more salt, um, then I think we could improve health outcomes without destroying all of the cereals and stuff.
if I could
But it
rub it,
is tricky.
if I could rub a bottle and get a genie and have a wish on this subject, it would be that the government's not even regulating this or funding it at all. We just teach correct principles and let people
Yes.
manage their own diets, right?
The problem is corporations don't really follow that rule. Corporations tend to get a lot of incentives from government, but they don't get controlled very much by government. And so we incentivize them, we incentivize growers to grow or not grow certain things. And then we say, oh, they're private businesses. We shouldn't be doing anything to regulate them when we've already gotten into the mix and chosen winners and losers.
Mhm.
Yeah, just get rid of the incentives.
And I would be in favor of that.
Speaking of that, I wanted to bring something up. A lot of people judge their benefit to the state that are in the government based on how many bills they bring to the table. You brought 4 bills to the table. That's not excessive at all. I would guess there's people that bring 10 to 20. Um,
30,
30, and
50.
they
Yeah.
somehow judge that that makes them a better legislator when I believe that less government, less is more when it comes to government, less regulation. Is there much opportunity for someone like you to propose bills that reduce or remove previous bills that might be excessive or overreaching from the government?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Have you
I
have
mean,
you looked into that a little bit, or is it, maybe that's something for the next session?
well, I do think we've done that on during COVID. I was not a legislator during COVID, but during COVID, we pushed back agency authority. We pushed back executive authority, and we bolstered the doctor-patient relationship. We removed restrictions from doctors and patients so that they can communicate better with each other and come to resolutions on personal health issues that should not involve government interference. So there's been a lot of that has happened already. Obviously, we are in so deep that we could be working on it for decades and not get rid of everything. But I think every step that we take is a step in the right direction.
But with people proposing 50, 40, or 50 bills, are we going backwards right now, or do you think we're
It depends on what's in their bills.
uh,
You have to propose a bill to get rid of legislation. So some of the bills are removing bad legislation. Some of them are consolidating legislation or existing code,
mhm.
um, so that it's trimmed back and a little less onerous and invasive. But some of them are adding to the code.
Yeah.
So I guess it just depends on where the balance is, if we're adding more than we're taking away. And my suspicion is that we are,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
That's what I was worried about. Now, really quick, there's the ones that we're going to look at. We got a list of four of them that people brought up before the meeting. I'm just going to say that the one that I brought in was HB 81, banning the inclusion of fluoride in drinking water. Stephanie Grecius proposed that one, and I think that's a good step towards a little bit of freedom that the people can choose. They can take fluoride in a pill. They can, it just makes it so that people aren't forced to take fluoride whether they want it or not. There may be some side effects to that, I'm not sure, but any time that something's being forced through the water, I think that can be a bad thing. So I'm glad that one was passed. With that, Seth has several that he had some questions on. So I think maybe if we take about 7 or 8 minutes, Seth, going over the three that you have. I know it's a short time for a lot of content, but go ahead and ask your questions about that of Kristen.
Oh, sure. Maybe I'll start with HB 273, I think it was.
Mhm.
This was the reverse keyword search bill. So it's on criminal law, but it touches on the same kind of data privacy issues that you were discussing with the license plate readers. And in a nutshell, one of my big concerns with HB 273 is that it adds a fairly vast swath of exceptions to the warrant requirement. I guess it's mainly twofold. One is that it authorizes the issuance of general warrants, which there's really no such thing. You always have to have a special description, a particular place and person to search for something, and probable cause accompanying that. So one, like first of all, is just the fact that it enables general warrants to issue, which are used then to bootstrap the issuance of special warrants. So under a general warrant, they can just go and use a dragnet, reverse keyword search, get from these internet service providers, okay, which devices searched for which combinations of keywords allegedly to go and investigate and prosecute certain crimes and so on. And then when they find some devices, they're anonymized in the first pass, but then the second pass, they can go and request a special warrant saying, hey, we think there's evidence of a crime, therefore give us the personally identifying information about these devices. And then they can go and confiscate those devices. And there was another bill that was proposed that would kind of blow open the lid on the stewardship of that data, and that would actually require them to make a complete copy of it, and the disposition of it was unclear that there would be any safeguards against that being transmitted to a third party, for example. So yeah, it's kind of a chain of events here. But first of all, the fact that they're even toying with the idea of general warrants, and secondly, that there's actually a very lengthy list of various criminal offenses for which they could not even have an accompanying a warrant for it. So yeah, I can paste the link to the bill if you want in the chat, in case anybody wants to look at this. But so those are some of my concerns around that, and just like with it's this potential irreversible harm through disclosure. If you're a business or something like that, and some investigator's like, oh, I'm going to look for these keywords, right? And then this law enforcement agency is like, oh, this machine, this device used these search terms that we suspect may be implicated in a crime. Here we're going to grab your device and create a full copy of it. That could eliminate people's competitive advantage, divulge their trade secrets to unknown third parties, and so on. Sounds a little paranoid, but the very fact that they allow that just seems to completely ruin the Fourth Amendment. So I wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Well, I'm looking through the bill now. It is, you bring up some concerning points that I definitely had not considered when I was reading through it before. I think it's always best to be paranoid, actually, because you never know what legislation is going to be used for. So, um, I think that, I mean, I really don't have any, other than what you've said, the concerns you've mentioned. I don't really have anything more to say about it. But I would appreciate it if you would write down your concerns and send them to me, and then I can address them with the sponsors and see if those things were considered when this was being written. And sometimes they are, and sometimes they're not. Sometimes we have unintended consequences, and I think those are valid concerns. So sorry, I don't really have a lot to offer you there.
Yeah. Anyways, yeah, that was one that just struck me to say, whoa, hey, they're doing away with the warrant requirement on a ton of stuff, and there are no checks in there on what kinds of keywords they might be using to go understand
Yeah,
tons of data
and
from people.
this is something that the Privacy Commission should be looking at. I'm going to send that to them right now. Um, and we'll see. We will be running some more privacy bills next session. So we'll see if maybe we can address these concerns in the next session in some of the other bills that we're running.
Yeah, that'd be really cool.
Okay.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. I
Okay.
guess the
Thank
other
you.
two main ones that were on my radar were, I guess, SB 203. You could lump in SGR 9 with this too. Both of these were basically limiting standing for civil suits, and SGR 9 imposes a blackout period on challenges to legislation using temporary restraining orders and preliminary injunctions for 90 days after the bill takes effect. I testified in that
Yeah.
hearing, and I said, hey, I'm not seeing a good reason for this. There's no constitutional allowance for putting a blackout period in people's right to challenge laws.
So I think that the reasoning behind this, in fact, I know the reasoning behind this, it was that we had laws that we had passed that were good laws, in my opinion, that um, months later objections were raised to, and then they were locked up in lawsuits and incapacitated. One of those is the vape law. We passed a law last session. I say we, I lobbied for the law. I was not a legislator, so I couldn't vote for it. But what it did is it removed the flavors from the vape solutions that were available in Utah.
Yeah, I'm
Well,
familiar with that one.
they asked if they could extend the the time period for emptying out their supply to a certain point, which was allowed. They were allowed to do that, but before that time period ran out, they they filed a lawsuit against the bill, which locked it up. So the bill had never, up until the end of the session, and I don't know what the status is right now, except that the lawsuit, we won the lawsuit. But during the session, the lawsuit was still um, active, and there was a bill to reintroduce the flavors. And so I actually ran a substitute bill that would have brought back the last year's bill and reinstated last year's bill, removing the flavors. And then it took out some of the objectionable language that was currently involved in the lawsuit. So my substitute passed in the House and ended up, through a series of events, killing the other bill, the flavor bill. So we ended up going back to the original bill, and the lawsuit was dropped. And so now the original bill can go into effect. But the fact that you can um, make it so that laws passed by the legislature can never go into effect by filing a lawsuit sometimes years um, after the law has been passed, that's a problem, because we have a legislature that is elected by the people to pass laws, and sometimes we don't like the laws. But the fact that one entity or group of people can stop those laws from being put into effect just by filing a lawsuit has been a problem multiple times, and that is the reason that this bill was passed.
Yeah, I guess I'm still not seeing any justification for suspending the constitutional review or limiting the standing of people to challenge them. Because if there is a bad law, then it deserves to be challenged, and if there's a good law, then yeah, I should be able to enforce it. But like I guess again with the kind of along the lines of the HB 273, one of the concerns here is irreparable harms. So like you could have a law, and I've found there were quite a few this last session that were passed that have this potential to just, you know, smash and grab. You know, harm is done, and even if you appeal it, and even if they manage to suspend the law some months later on down the road, the harm's still done.
Yeah, I understand that perspective. And it is a concern for me, but I also see the other concern that outside parties can just come in and lock up any law we pass, and we can't do anything about it.
Thanks.
So I'm not sure what the appropriate solution is, but I do understand your concern.
Well, and that's only with the, you know, approval of the courts. Is that right? It only gets suspended if they do grant the order.
Right.
So I mean, it's
The
still
check
left
and
with no.
balance kind of a, isn't it? It's a,
Yeah,
sort of a check and balance. So I see both sides too. Anyway, sorry to throw
yeah.
myself,
So,
but
to admit there is a check, there is recourse still there. So I mean, if it's
Well, yes, there is if the courts are not activist courts.
well, and here's the issue though is that I think most of the time we should be willing to tolerate some deadlock. Yeah, I agree that if there's a good law, we should be able to enforce it. But this is another reason why I'm all in favor of restoring jury trials. Let the juries figure it out. And if there's an individual case where there needs to be some nullification, let them do it. But you know, and let's yeah, but we got to keep the powers of judicial review too. So
Well, it's definitely something that could use some more conversation.
yeah, I'm all about that. I don't know if there's time, but SJR 6 was also concerning. I've noticed there were a lot of bills that were pushing this notion of federalism on account of the Loper Bright decision. So it's a federal court ruling saying, hey, we're reversing the Chevron doctrine and basically supposedly giving powers back to the states. But in a nutshell, version of that is they cite the 10th Amendment saying we're giving power back to the states to combat federal overreach. But the reality is they only partially cite the 10th Amendment, saying that the powers not granted to the federal government are reserved to the states, and they leave off the or to the people part. And
Um,
another assertion there in SGR 6 and related bills where they just claim that the states have, you know, general authority and police powers. And that was a legal fiction that was invented by the Supreme Court over the past century or so, more so towards the end of the 20th century. But it was affirmed in the 2012 case on NFIB versus Sebelius, the Obamacare appeals. Anyways, it's this notion of states don't have to adhere to enumerated powers by their state constitutions, basically making state governments unlimited. And they use this to say, oh, we have like general authority to dictate all things related to water rights and energy policy and transportation and agriculture, like everything. And I'm just like seeing like, whoa, this looks like a power grab to me. So I wondered about your thoughts on that too.
um,
Pasting the
well,
yeah.
so a lot of this stuff, because there is so much going through during the session, a lot of this stuff, and if it's not fresh in my mind, it's hard to know what my reasons were for voting for or against it. I'm just looking at it right now. So SJR 7 is what you're looking at, right?
SGR 6, it's the Joint
Oh,
Resolution on
6.
Federalism. Sorry. Yeah, it's
I'm sorry, I was looking at the wrong one. Okay.
supporting state jurisdiction under the principle of federalism. See, there's SGR 6 and there's also SGR 12, but like there's line 33 in particular. Maybe you can just read it too. Yeah, so 30 and 31, 30 through 34. Whereas the federal government is a government of limited jurisdiction and powers, whereas the state has inherent general jurisdiction and authority under the state's traditional police powers to enact legislation and regulations in subject areas affecting public welfare, safety, health, and morality, as recognized under the 10th Amendment, including over natural resources, water resources and rights, agriculture, education, and energy resources. The 10th Amendment doesn't say any of that stuff. You know, I understand the Federalist Papers that they're they're citing by indirection through this, basically stating that the states have indefinite powers. But all that means is, per the federal constitution, the powers of the states are undefined. It doesn't mean they're unlimited. So I'm taking
So
issue.
I think what they're trying to do here is assert these powers over the federal government, that they are states' rights, not federal. I think that's the intent here. So we are the state. The people are the state. And we have the right to look at all of these things. The federal government does not. And I think that is what they were trying to assert with this bill.
Yeah, I'd just be leery of it because it is very much a federal movement, and it seems kind of ironic to me that the fact that they're asserting a federal edict. And if you look at the Loper Bright decision, they actually instruct courts to defer to the executive branch's interpretations of constitutionality, which seems to me like a transgression of the separation of powers as well. But so I would beg to differ at least on the point of I don't see the state and the people as the same. If that were the case, then there wouldn't be that additional phrase in the 10th Amendment, and we wouldn't have to worry about keeping our state in check, but we actually do.
Or to the people, right?
Right.
So I agree with that. But I do know that the intent of this was to assert state authority over the federal government. And maybe they could refine it. Um, but the one to talk to about that is Ken Ivory. Um,
Mhm.
Ken, I know that his intent is always to assert the rights of the states over the federal government. That's his thing. So if the wording needs to be changed, Ken is the one to talk to about that.
All right,
Yeah, I can supply on this one too, and I think they misunderstood my point on it. But
I want to open it up just before we let Kristen go. Kristen, thanks for spending some time today with us. I just want to see if there's anyone else that has any questions before we let you go that's on the call. Anyone else? I have one last question for you, and I just wanted to say that I think what I learned from our first meeting is that both sides really fear that the other side is going to exert power over those that don't believe the same way. So the Democrats feel like Donald Trump is going to over use his power overly to go after people that don't agree with him. And when Biden was president, I think people were worried that he was going to overstep his bounds and punish those that didn't believe the same way he does. But what recourse do we have if there is some overstep? Let's say the DOJ or FBI come and raid someone's house just because you're posting something they don't like. How does a state protect their citizens from that kind of overreach by the federal government?
Well, I think that's the role of the sheriff. The
Mhm.
sheriff has jurisdiction. I mean, the sheriff's jurisdiction trumps that of the federal government, pardon the Trump reference.
Mhm.
Um, and that is why we need to be very careful who we elect to be our sheriff,
Mhm.
because some sheriffs will abdicate that right, and some of them will embrace it. And I don't know well, I don't know where everybody is here. I'm in Utah County, but I feel like our sheriff does do a pretty good job of asserting our rights over the federal government.
Mhm.
I don't think that he's had a really tough test yet,
Mhm.
but I think he does a pretty good job. But I think that is our line of defense, is having good sheriffs and making sure that the laws aren't changed to take away their role as our protection.
I know there are efforts underway to make them more reporting to the federal government or beholden to the federal government instead of being independent.
Yeah,
That is crucial for all sides to keep them independent and just reporting only to the people of their area.
yep. And I have in the back of my mind that there was a bill to that effect last session, not this most recent session, but the 2024 session,
Mhm.
that there was something that would have neutered the right of the sheriffs
Mm.
to stand up to the federal government. and to protect their jurisdiction. So we do have to be very aware
If
and
you
make
see
sure
something
that
like
that's not
that,
happening.
if you see something like that again, will you let me know and I'll tell this group and others?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's really important to me personally too. So,
Me too.
all right.
Yeah.
Anyone else before we let Kristen go? And Kristen, you can stay. If you want, I'm going to put stop recording, and we're going to hit the last few items on our agenda. So
Okay, I'm going to run because I've got my mom here waiting in the car with me.
uh,
So thank you so much for
thank
having me
you,
on,
thank you for
and
taking the
thank you
time.
for what you're doing.
Uh, you too.
All right.
Okay, see ya.
Bye.